Welcome to Webster Now with your host, Garrett Wagner.
The Comprehensive Plan Committee was supposed to be finished last week. It wasn't. And honestly, I'm glad it wasn't. This document, this committee's work, is what's supposed to shape what Webster looks like for the next 10, 20, maybe even 30 years. And in my view, our last couple of comprehensive plans haven't really steered the town's decision the way they were supposed to. So this time, we've got to get it right? Come on, we got to get it right. At the committee's July 27th, 2026 meeting, the plan for the night was to pull in another round of resident feedback, committee feedback, board feedback, and the committee recommend the draft and send to the town board, all in the same meeting. And that is not how it went, because the committee members pushed back on the process. And that's the part I want you to catch, because the slowdown didn't start when 40 or 50 residents walked in the door. It started earlier, with committee members asking whether they could really recommend a document where the newest public comments, their own and others, hadn't been looked at, incorporated, and discussed. I also want to say something about that the committee before we go any further. They've taken plenty of heat during this whole thing, and not all of it's fair. These are Webster residents who volunteered, who spent months grinding through a complicated document. They've earned a thank you for that, not to get treated like they personally are trying to run or ruin Webster's future. Their job is to prepare the plan, to be a voice, to provide feedback and input, and then recommend it to the town board. They don't adopt it. The elected town board does that. And you can question the process. You can tear into the draft. You can flat out disagree with everything about it. That's all fair game. But we should be honest about what these volunteers were actually asked to do and what they weren't. That night, the residents showed up with real concerns. Green space, sustainability, walkability, housing, property rights, and whether this plan will get implemented. And as we go today, I'm going to get into where I think the draft is strong, where it still needs work, and why slowing down the whole thing is the best news that we've got on this plan in months. And just a quick reminder, everything here today is my perspective only. Nothing said reflects official policy or action. So let's get into it. At the meeting, the Comprehensive Plan Committee held a public session, and somewhere around 50 residents showed up. It's great. They reviewed the draft. They left comments on sticky notes and put little stickers next to the ideas they liked, which is either totally adorable or the future of local government. I haven't decided. That's a real turnout for a document most people would call pretty dry. And I mean that with love, because you know what? I like reading these things, but the schedule that was set up created a pretty basic problem. So picture the timeline. You spend a couple hours pulling in a fresh pile of comments. You stack those on top of a month's worth you haven't fully worked through yet. And then before everyone heads home, you vote to recommend the whole thing to the town board.
All right, let's quit while we're ahead.
That was so awesome.
That was awesome.
Now, for me, I kept going through in my head and couldn't get it to add up. What does that resolution even say? We recommend this plan, and we'll go ahead and fix it later based on all the feedback we haven't read yet. That's recommending the idea of a finished draft and hoping the real one shows up afterwards somehow, some way. Now, the consultant emphasized that New York law only requires 2 hearings in this whole process. 1, the committee recommends the plan. 2, the board acts on it. Okay, sure. That is the legal minimum. But when a room of people had just handed you a stack of new comments, the legal minimum's a strange place to plant your flag at whether the work is actually ready and whether the work is actually good for Webster. Now, to their credit, they admitted more meetings would be needed because people had asked for them. And in the end, the committee made the right call. They, the committee, slowed it down. Yes, that group of people who've gotten so much grief said, not yet. The comments get reviewed, the draft gets revised, and they'll meet again once, maybe twice, to be determined before anything goes to the town board. That's more work and more time. But when someone hands you a draft back covered in notes, you don't stay put shut and call it finished. Not when it's this important.
Post-its!
Now, I want to take a moment and be honest about my own experience with this too. As you know, I'm an elected town board member, and down the road, And in the process of the timing, I may be asked to vote on whether Webster adopts the plan. I'm not on the comprehensive plan committee. I don't run how it works. But when asked, I figured I'd still provide real feedback, my feedback. And to be clear, I have no expectations that my feedback would ever get adopted. Same as any resident. Feedback is feedback. It's ideas, suggestions that be reviewed and considered and thought of. Some will make it to the final plan, some won't. That's how it's supposed to work. Because as one committee member said in the meeting, the more feedback we get, the better. Positive feedback, negative feedback, all of it helps. And that is a great, great sentiment. So I submitted detailed written comments by the deadline and later found out indirectly my comments were not shared with the committee. It took a little bit of back and forth over email, but they finally got passed along. And the comments I'd formally submitted weren't personal attacks. They weren't crazy demands. I raised three main areas, all of it on the public record, through the same process we all get to use. One, the plan should be built around Webster specifically. That's right here. The state's smart growth principles, they're a framework, but Webster shouldn't just run with a generic template when our situation calls for us to be unique, because we are unique. Two, we should identify open space areas that matter most, expand, protect them, and figure out how that works in Webster's future. Three, it should lay out a clear plan for walkability using what we've already got, the Ojak Trail and the 104 bike path. You can disagree on any of that. That's the process, and that's fine. The committee should at least been able to see it and weigh it and consider it, just like any resident. And here's what stuck with me. If it was this much of a hassle for a town board member, someone who might actually vote on this whole thing to get written comments from the committee, what is it like for a regular resident trying to take part in this for the first time? I think that's the bigger worry. Public participation can't mean giving people somewhere to drop a comment. The real process needs time to actually weigh those comments, explain the choices being made, the pros and cons, the short, the long term, and show people what changed as a result and what didn't. That's why extra time matters, because this plan should guide our future, and our future, it matters. One committee member said they wish they'd been able to reach out to the public more. Now, there's another moment from that night I kept coming back to. Here's how current town supervisor Alex described the town's public outreach.
Over the past year and a half, there has been significant public engagement, including meetings, stakeholder interviews, pop-up events, surveys, emails, and website visits.
Those two don't have to contradict each other. At this point, it is widely known that perceived lack of sufficient public input in this plan is one of the major concerns. We've been hearing that for a while. Put them side by side, though, you can hear a real gap between how the current town supervisor described the outreach and how some committee members and the public feel about how many residents and voices have taken part. So now we've covered the process. Let's talk about the draft itself, because it's a big one. It's long, it's lengthy. The draft pulls together a lot of priorities that matter to Webster. It takes green space seriously. It pushes walkability. It thinks about connecting different parts of our town, and it wrestles with how new development should sit next to the neighborhoods we already have. Those are the right things to be looking at. My problem isn't with what's in the draft. It's all those pieces don't yet add clear enough direction to where Webster's headed. There's some contradictions, missing pieces. It's a draft. It needs to be pulled together. Because a comprehensive plan shouldn't just be a nice collection of good ideas. It's supposed to help us choose. What kind of community are we trying to protect, to build? When two goals collide, which one wins? What does smart growth even mean in a town that's almost already built out? How do we balance housing, development, green space, infrastructure, people's property rights, housing values, all at once for now into the future? And the big one, what's the actual path for Webster over the next 30 years? And not some anywhere US suburb, but for this specific place where we live. And that's, I think, where the next draft has to sharpen. Really focus on what makes Webster, Webster. Our neighborhoods, the commercial corridors, parks, open space, the waterfront, farming history, farming future. Then it has to all tie that to real priorities, actions you can measure, people who are responsible, and some way to tell whether any of this is being carried out. Balance with the grant world, not being too generic, not being too specific. The bones are there. The finished document just needs to feel a lot more like Webster and be a lot more useful when the town, the planning board, the staff, and residents are stealing down real choices in years ahead. So the comprehensive plan isn't done, and that's not a failure. The committee saw the schedule, then got it out ahead of the actual work, pushed back, and bought some time to really weigh what residents and everybody else had tuned in for. And now comes the real test. The next draft has to let people see what changed, what ideas made it in, which ones didn't, and start to understand why. Otherwise, public input turns into something we tally up instead of something that generally shapes the result. The committee, they've earned the credit for slowing this down. Residents earned a look at where their feedback actually moved the document. At Webster, we've earned and deserve a comprehensive plan that does more than check a legal box or hit a deadline. It has to point somewhere, and it has to be something we can use to get there. Keep showing up, keep commenting, and keep paying attention while this thing is still open. Because every step we take is a step towards a better Webster.
You've been watching Webster Now with Garrett Wagner. Join us next time for more local news and updates.